Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 34, Episode 19. Coming up on this show, we've got Super Soaker Holy Water, When Curiosity Beckons Monsters, and Cracking the Angel Code. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
Is this the follow-up to the book that we covered on the Last Plus episode?
Yeah, so on the Last Plus episode, we did Gazing into the Afterlife by Irene Blinston, who, during her doctorate program in the early 2000s, was part of a study into the Psychomantium.
The Psychomantium, yeah.
And the Psychomantium is a setup that induces an altered state of consciousness. And essentially the participant would be in an enclosed, light-controlled space.
And they stare into a mirror.
Well, not into the mirror.
Oh, yes, it's at an angle, right?
They couldn't see their reflection, but the mirror would create a mirrored surface that they would stare at for about an hour. And the whole purpose was the participants in the study had just lost a loved one. So it was to test whether the Psychomantium would help them get over their grief. So Irene was a part of this program, and many of the participants, as we reported on the Last Plus show, had incredible interactions, either seeing things in the surface of the mirror, like old school scrying, or having visual stimulation. Some people reported feeling unseen hands touching them.
Well, it gets rather wild, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does absolutely escalate.
Some people heard voices of their loved ones. There were even apparitions appearing. So pretty bizarre stuff. And it was funny because while we were covering that, we were saying to ourselves, this really does sound like just open spirit communication. Like, how is the Psychomantium any different to a Ouija board, for example? You're opening yourself up to the other side. You're trying to contact the dead. And when we got to the end of that book, I was looking up what else she had written, and I came across this.
Well, that was because you're right. We were asking that question. I mean, even though it was in, I guess, what you could consider to be, like a psychology study, constrained environment, and because it was about grief, people weren't having really open invitations to any low-level spirits that come through in these sorts of things. But then we did speculate, does this result in some type of wild goose chase where people are commonly misled by these spirits and end up having their lives kind of destroyed? Well, it turns out that yes.
Yeah, we came across this earlier book she'd written, Cracking the Angel's Code, One Woman's Journey Deciphering Angelic Messages of What Is to Come. And I read the description, and there were all these messages she received from angels over a 2-year period telling her about upcoming earth changes, who she was in the past, why she needed to go to Antarctica. It's just, it's this crazy story, again, of these entities coming through telling you, you're the chosen one.
Yeah.
It's on you to save the world. She's like, where do I need to go to save the world? Oh, there's a man you need to find in Antarctica. He's dead, but don't worry, still go because you need to find his body. It's just nuts.
Why don't these entities just basically say, go to Tatooine? It's like, it always is like just so, but can't you tell as a person who's having these experiences that's like, hang on a second. Not only like in some of the reports that we cover, do they wander into a field that's down the road from their house, albeit at 2:00 in the morning and they're meeting a Bigfoot. But like once it tells you that you have to go to Antarctica, don't you have some type of mechanism where you go, you know what, that's not
it's
right.
like, that's a bit far. Is there somewhere within 7 minutes drive I can go to save the world? Spirits? Because that's a little bit out of my, travel range. But no, she gets all these instructions on where to go, how to save the world, why she's the chosen one. And it's just funny that we came across this. So I'm looking forward to sharing that story in our Plus extension coming up later.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. But for this episode, actually, I wanted to go into a work that was written by Nomar Slevik. And I think we've touched on his pieces in the past, but he's got this great book out called Humanoid Encounters, Creatures, Phantoms, and Other Strange Entities Sighted in Maine. And it's got a foreword by Albert Rosales. And just by coincidence, I was actually digging through one of Albert Rosales' PDFs that he publicizes. And he's a great humanoid researcher.
The king of humanoid research.
He really is.
The goat.
If you're looking for obscure humanoid cases from in a wide variety of categories, this is what he does. He does it really well. Like he's good at just kind of trawling through old magazines, old reports, old the annals of paranormal stuff. And he even cites, like, because he's written the preface or the foreword for this book, he's like, this stuff, it's like, it's difficult to really categorize what's going on here. And that's pretty much what I was saying on that Last Plus episode as well, that there are these outlying cases. Like we all know stories of Bigfoot and the Greys and that kind of stuff. And people know what ghosts are. These are reoccurring entities that show up in this whole genre. But for some people, they have an experience with an entity or a creature which is just beyond the pale. It's something that it will show up, it will appear to a bunch of different people and then disappear very quickly. And it never shows up in the history again. Although you can see parallels in these sorts of cases. And there's some similarities here in what Nomar has put together about these cases from a very specific location in Maine. It seems to be this paranormal hotspot, but also for what appear to be more of the unusual cases of entities that people experience. But before we get into it, where I got to this is actually came from Alternate Perceptions magazine. Of course, Brent Rain's fantastic website. He does a great work as well. There was a write-up by Albert Rosales that just happened. Again, this coincidence. So I figured I have to follow this. There's some pattern here today. So he's got this write-up from actually a recent case from 2023, quite recent. It's from February the 18th. And it relates to this strange encounter that kind of sets up the scene for many of the cases that I'm going to be describing today as well. But it comes from Chile. It relates to 5 young men who are just camping. They bring all their typical kind of camping stuff with them. There's nothing unusual about it. They set up their tents around their campfire. And as they're sitting there, and what I must highlight with many of these cases as well, going back to, again, that Plus episode, is there seems to be this theme, this attribute from these cases that is you have to be in a remote or isolated location.
Sure.
That's where these things will show up. Maybe it's like if there's too many people around, it can't manifest. Maybe it knows that it's too dangerous for it to be witnessed. Maybe these things only want to show themselves to certain people. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. But it definitely does seem to be connected to isolated locations. So they're at the summit of Maypo, and as they're sitting around the campfire, apparently they all just suddenly notice these strange lights that are just coming down the hill. And they actually approach the lights because no one else was supposed to be out there, and they're intrigued by something like this happening.
Does it look like other campers or something?
It's not said, but the fascinating thing about this is that this is what I was talking about, curiosity beckoning monsters. Right? This was the headline for the show. And this is what we do, though. Don't get me wrong. I'm not ragging on anyone. This is what human beings do. But in so many of these cases, they see unusual lights, and rather than just waiting to see what happens or kind of steering clear of it, they make a line for it. They make a beeline for it. Like, what the hell's that?
And it's like a lure in the deep ocean.
Yeah, it really is. It's like these lights, the Min Min lights. It's luring people in, and it really does have this feeling of this curiosity beckoning the unknown into your life. So they head towards these lights. And all that is said, and I guess there must be a translation going on here, so there's not a lot of details about what happens, but it does say that they interacted with these lights and they realized that it had an obvious intelligence. I'm like, okay, that's pretty typical for orb encounters. It's not just lights, it's more likely orbs. They become frightened and the group retreats. Now, in the meantime, these lights are just dancing around. Again, they're kind of acting as a lure. They're ducking behind the mountain and would come out again, and they come down the hill. And then they said, as they're watching the lights, it's almost like a distraction, but one of them or a couple of them realize that there is something hovering over the summit. And they said it's a strange ship. They don't describe what it looks like. They just say it's this strange, I'm assuming an ONV or a UFO.
OVNI, yeah.
The OVNI, I'm sorry. So later on, because they're not leaving, right? It's all very unusual. It's kind of this light show that's going on. But they said they got the feeling that these strange lights are definitely trying to distract them, but for an unknown reason. So they walk back to the tents. So they've gotten quite a distance away from the tents. When they get back to the tents, they say they're around 20 meters away. They see this large energy sphere with 2 strange humanoids standing next to it. The humanoids are just simply grey type. They're just greys, right? Apparently, all 5 witnesses were able to see the sphere and the 2 entities, which is important to point out because in some of these cases, or in fact, many of these cases, you will have it that only 1 or 2 people are capable of seeing what's going on. But no, it was all very much in reality occurring across all of them being able to witness this. Now, apparently there were several strange incidents that were connected to this presence, but they don't say what it was. Again, they do say that apparently these beings started to imitate the movements of the witnesses. So that's kind of strange. I don't know what they're doing there. But they say suddenly, in front of the witnesses' eyes, this strange figure appears. It appeared to be building a campfire. But the witnesses said that this wasn't a normal human being. In fact, This was a humanoid shape, but constructed of a strange shiny orange color. It also emitted an orange glow from its body, making it look as though it were on fire.
But it's on fire, but it's also gathering sticks to create a campfire. Now, this strange figure remained in the area, making repetitive movements for at least 3 to 4 hours, as if it was stuck in a loop. They were watching it for 4 hours?
I know. I'm like, and are you watching the greys? Do the greys even know that you're there? Apparently, a lot of the detail of what the entity was doing, the witnesses said they couldn't describe or comprehend. So I'm like,
dude, I'd be so bored looking at a fiery alien after maybe an hour max.
Well, look, I think 15 minutes. I'm like, okay, you going to do anything else? I'm just going to get out of here.
Especially if they're stuck on a loop.
I know. But I was actually thinking about that robot that you showed me this week that was announced, that apparently it's like this new AI robot that is...
The Neo or the Chinese one?
I think it was the Neo. Or was that the one that can be remotely operated with the AI goes down?
That's the Neo.
That's the Neo, right? Yeah, I'm thinking, is that what this is? Have these alien species? They just have robots just handling the mundane work.
The Neo takes like 10 minutes to fill your dishwasher with 2 glasses. And I think this fiery guy, so it took him 4 hours to build a campfire.
So it all adds up, Ben. It's checking out.
So it seems like the aliens haven't advanced in the robot technology arena.
No, because the AI bubble is about to burst. You watch, quote me on this one. It's about to burst. And when that happens, everyone's going to end up with a 10-minute dishwasher robot.
Even the new model catches on fire and takes 4 hours to build a campfire.
That's exactly what's going on. So as they're watching, apparently there was a nearby waterfall, and these witnesses said that near the waterfall there was some sort of hovering platform or a ship. They don't say what it is, but it had these grey type variety beings that were observing and studying the proceedings. So I'm like, were these greys just watching, waiting to see how long the idiot humans would stay watching a glowing humanoid walk back and forward? Apparently, sometimes later, I don't know how long, the lights began to circle the tents. And for whatever reason, the guys just went to bed. They've got some weird robot doing stuff. There's greys watching them. They've got lights circling their tents. Like, oh, I know. Let's go to bed. So they go to bed. Apparently, the lights continued to circle around the witnesses as if searching for something. The witnesses remain terrified. And look, I should be fair. Maybe they're in such an isolated location that they can't get out of there. The best way is to just pretend like it's, not going to affect them. I don't know. So maybe they're just so fearful. But apparently they watched from their tents as these lights floated over the strange glowing entity, the orange entity, circled the entity. But apparently the entity didn't even notice that the lights were doing it. It's just like going about its business.
What is going on in this report?
Repetitive looping movements is written here. So apparently though, and again, this is what's really difficult about this, is soon after the witnesses experienced a traumatic event. What that is not fully detailed.
Okay.
It just basically says, according to them, a thick fog began to descend from the mountains and approach their location. Again, this fog.
Is that the traumatic event?
Well, as this occurred, the witnesses began feeling an enormous pressure in their bodies. They eventually became disoriented and passed out. According to the report, there were other events that they did not go into detail about, but were equally impressive and terrifying.
Yeah, that sounds like the traumatic event.
But what happened?
They passed out.
No, but it says there were other events, but they didn't go into detail about it.
It says right at the bottom that according to the source, additional details are forthcoming.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to get to. But
so this is from the Chilean OVNI, which I guess is the MUFON in Chile.
It is, yeah. So basically, we've got this really great, what I think is a great case, but obviously it's one of these things that has to be translated and, you lose details through translation. But hopefully
multiple eyewitnesses though.
Multiple eyewitnesses. Yep. So hopefully there's more information forthwith coming with this stuff. But again, it got me intrigued because, Albert Rosales, as I said, a great researcher. So I wanted to dig a little bit further. So also on Alternate Perceptions website, there's this write-up called UFOs over Wayne, Maine. And this is, of course, linking into the town of Wayne. And this particular location is a hotbed of this kind of activity, which is highlighted by Nomar, Nomar in his book, which I'll go into in a moment. But I wanted to mention just a couple of these cases just to show you that it really does highlight that, even though there's a lot of stuff that's been happening in Maine over many decades, and this is just what's been reported, right? Surely stuff has been happening for a long time outside of that. But in this particular report, it was the mid-1970s where some truly extraordinary things were happening in this one locale.
Looks pretty rural.
It's, again, reasonably isolated. It's not completely rural, but reasonably isolated. It really is a hotspot for this kind of activity. So you've got the story of Mike Waite. So this happened on a location known as North Pond Road. It's near Walton Road, if you're familiar with the area. Apparently, he said on this particular evening or this afternoon, getting into the evening, he was 11 or 12. He said it was very nice out, but then something, just a thing, appeared in the sky. It flew low over the house and hovered for a moment. It stayed just above the house before moving towards Berry Pond. And he says, look, it looked kind of like a saucer, but it had these glowing, spinning lights around it. So it's like a classic kind of saucer shape. Again, mid-1970s, so it's kind of before the real full-on, kind of X-Files and cultural shift before describing these things. He told his parents and his neighbors about it. But he said what really stood out was that he recalls this smell that filled the house afterwards. And he says, I can't remember the year. I can't remember the exact date, but I remember that smell. It was like electrical wire had burnt or something. I'm like, yeah, it's like that ozone smell, which is associated with a lot of UFO activity. And some people have speculated it's because the engine or propulsion systems of these UFOs emit some type of field which generates ozone. But what is unusual is that normally ozone should kind of just dissipate eventually, but this filled the house. And he said also, before we knew about the Oz factor, the Oz effect, where everything goes silent, he says when this was taking place, there was no sound. When it took off, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. Now, apparently this sighting didn't remain private. You've got Linda McKee. She was a correspondent for a local journal newspaper. She ran a piece about what had taken place. And apparently almost immediately, other accounts started flowing in from the neighborhood. You've got a woman on Fairbanks Road. She phoned to say that she'd been sitting on her porch overlooking Berry Pond, of course, where the UFO had taken off to. This was on the same night in which Waite had seen it. Apparently, she watched a bright flying object streak across the sky in that direction near her home. So you're getting this validation that's coming through.
All of these sightings are near kind of large bodies of water. So there's a lake there, and the previous sighting you were just mentioning was up here.
Yes.
So there's a large lakes nearby. Is that a coincidence?
I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that's got something to do with it. But for what, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if it's facilitating something. I don't know if it's deep enough for them to hide in. I just don't know. But you're right. Water definitely plays a role in these cases. You've also got Roy Waite. So he's Mike's father. He actually called Linda to ask her, like, oh, is there anything else about this sighting that you had? Is there anything that was unusual? And she's like, yeah, she's like, there was something that smelled funny that was in the house. It was kind of like Freon. Now, Freon, I think is, I don't know if it's inert, but I think it's an inert gas that they use in fridges.
Refrigeration gas.
Yeah, but guess what smell it has? It's kind of like ozone. Not completely, but it kind of is similar. So it's fascinating that she would describe it in that way. Again, another detail which is kind of validating what Mike had experienced. Now, of course, Linda the reporter was, listening to these people. And she said, look, there's no signs of people with wild imaginations. They're telling the truth. And they know the difference between, what is imaginary and what's real. You've then got over Cross Road, which is a stretch near Berry Pond, which seems to be the water center of this stuff. You've got a girl named Jackie. She saw something very curious, but a year after Mike. So it wasn't the same night. She and her mother...
They're in the lakes.
Well, yeah, I wonder. She and her mother had just moved into a new home. They had no curtains yet, so they were sitting on the couch talking when something outside caught their attention. She said, we saw this huge UFO right in front of our house, right in the street. It was getting dark outside, and we could see this circular thing just hovering over the street. Now, she hesitated to describe it because she said it was strange because it was kind of pink, but it was enormous. It was bigger than the house. And for an hour, we sat in stunned silence, unwilling to speak about what had taken place. We didn't want to tell others because anyone would think that we were crazy. But of course, the next day we checked the pavement. There was no marks and no evidence whatsoever left behind. Now, that's telling because, like the case from Chile, isn't it strange that they sat there for an hour? It's like, I wonder if, and they're describing these campers that they watched it for 4 to 5 hours. Is it that they actually experienced 4 to 5 hours? Or is it that they looked at their watches afterwards and were like, 4 to 5 hours? That's kind of
that's a good
missing
point.
time.
Yeah.
Is there missing time going on here?
You should know the feeling of 4 hours versus 1 hour, though.
You should.
I think it's more that you're so jaded, you would be bored by seeing a UFO after about 10 minutes.
I can be literally
for normal people,
transported on board, taken aboard the UFO, given piloting lessons, and I'll be like,
just looking at your watch the whole time. I got places to be, guys. Can we get this abduction over?
I've got a show to put out. Like, come on. Yeah, I get it. Apparently also a local woman who was well known, but she wanted to be anonymous because obviously, the fear about this stuff. But she had a very similar story. She said this incident happened in the summer of 1974 or 1975. She can't exactly recall. She'd been walking home from a friend's place, and as she walked along Pond Road, another location where much of this activity had been witnessed.
I got Pond Road on the screen right now. Look how beautiful this place looks.
Oh, it's spectacular, isn't it? Yeah.
Look at the day that the Google card drew through here. It's like a perfect day. You've got the lake on that side.
But even all like this verdant green everywhere.
Look how
it's
green
just,
it is.
Yeah.
Not a freaking gum tree in sight. Paradise.
Not a gum tree that'll explode with a simple, match anywhere near it.
No fucking emus anywhere. Paradise.
No koalas are going to drop on you. Wombats are going to run over. All that kind of stuff. Anyway, she said that while she was walking along Pond Road, she reached the elementary schools, like the perimeter of the school, and she said she saw this bright blue light moving amongst the treetops. It kind of flared and then disappeared behind the trees. It only lasted a few minutes. It made absolutely no sound, but it caused her to run home in fear, leaving her with a very much terrible sense of unease. So taken together, these sightings on what's occurring along these roads and everything, it suggests that there's some type of flap happening in Wayne in the mid-1970s. But then years later, you've got Mike's stepmother. Her name was Regina. She apparently was asleep one evening, or she would sleep facing the window because she liked watching the stars. But she says on one night in the late 1980s, so many years have passed, she observed this bright spotlight that descended into a field just beyond their barn. It vanished, but for whatever reason, it not only left her feeling confused, but also very scared. Now, the couple who had lived near the property before the Waites had actually told of UFOs landing around that area, but didn't give any further, kind of information.
Right.
But they were quite, disturbed by what was taking place. But then the other stories started kind of flowing out. You've got a report from Joel. He apparently saw these strange balls of light streaking across the sky in 2011 that took turns and then disappeared behind trees. His neighbor Gary reported this strange disc-shaped object that was zigzagging and making right-angle turns, climbing and diving and heading around. You've also got a suggestion that apparently 50 feet across this craft, like this craft was 50 feet across, but it kind of was flooding the area with clouds. So it's like, is it this fog that's reported in some UFO activity? Like they're using a fog as some type of camouflage. He also claims later that same year, he saw a cigar-shaped object with a green glow just simply glide over the yacht club and then vanish. But then Gary's experiences actually turn into something that really could be described as being entirely bizarre. And I feel like this is what, I was making a joke before that, UFO sightings are like some weird Nigerian prince scam. Because people go, how do those scams work? Like, why are people dumb enough to fall for them? Because they send out so many of them. They just hit such a huge number of people that there's always someone that will fall for them. And I feel like it's the same with UFO sightings, right? So many people have encounters with, like, they see something in the sky, but how many reports do we get of anything else happening? It's reduced, right? You've got a limited pool of people compared to people that are having encounters directly as opposed to people that see a light in the sky. It's like they try to lure people in. This is really what it is. It's a lure. And most people don't go for it, but some people do. And I don't know if it's through their own actions. I don't know if it's because they're particularly susceptible to it. There's something about them. But there are a group of people that after seeing a UFO, the entirety of their lives become madness.
Yeah, but on the other hand, a lot of the abduction or abductee claims, there's not necessarily a UFO sighting associated with it at all. They just start getting taken.
True, but if you dig into their history, you often find that when they were children, they saw UFOs. Or they had something like that taking place. So going to Gary, I think he's one of these, you get through the next selection process, right? You go to the next round of testing because apparently one evening after he'd been seeing these UFOs, he's just simply watching television. And as he's watching television, something bangs on his window. So he looks up, right? And he says this shadow is hanging in midair. He said it then shifted into an almond-shaped glitch-like opening, and he watched as several small luminous figures human-like with wings 8 or 9 inches tall, simply flooded out of it. They hovered and seemed to talk amongst themselves. Suddenly they all turned and looked at Gary, then smiled at him, and then simply went back into the vortex.
They had wings?
They had wings. They're like,
were they flapping them?
They must have been like 9 inches, 8 to 9 inches tall. And of course, afterwards, he started doing online research and people were like, oh, you've probably experienced nature elementals. Or I'm like, I'm not so sure that that's what's going on. Like you're seeing UFOs and then a vortex opens next to your window while you're watching TV and these things flow out. Not entirely sure about that. Then you've got a man who was like his life was an outdoorsman. He says that the sky is known for its predictable things, a rather interesting way to put it. But he said he's seen strange things happen in mid-November one evening. And I don't know what year this was, but it must have been later. It must have been moving into the 2000s. Apparently, he was unloading his weapon after a hunt. He said his son, Andrew, watched what looked like a bright star on the horizon, but it suddenly came straight at them at treetop level. Apparently, it had 4 fins on it, and then it just simply disappeared. On another night, he was watching a silver cigar-shaped object that moved through the clouds as if it had its own weather. So it's like, again, this weird maybe camouflage, I think. You've got another resident. It was the same man. His name was Shet. He claims that his wife watched a light zip through the sky and then vanish at an impossible speed. Also a man with military experience in an aircraft. He knew that this was not a conventional aircraft. Like there's something else going on here. So many of these accounts, there was the 1970s cluster, but it does set this scene up that not just this particular town of Wayne, but Maine itself has a history of very strange activity going on. So I wanted to dig into Nomar's book. This is Humanoid Encounters, which I'll link to, of course, in the show notes. So
where are you getting the Maine sightings from? What's the source?
That's from Alternate Perceptions,
okay,
which, of course, I'll link to as well. But going into Nomar's book, it's always fascinating. I just love this because I guess for most people, if you're writing a book about the paranormal, you usually have an experience that causes you to have an interest in it. Like it does have this thing. I don't think people usually spontaneously are really interested in the paranormal unless they've got, a curious mind perhaps, but to go to the level of writing a book about it, you usually find that they're motivated by an experience that they have had personally.
Pretty much all he writes about as well. He's got books on UFOs and abductions.
Yeah, there we go. So UFOs over Maine, that's a book we covered many, many years ago. But yeah, like he's a great writer. Now, what I will say about this book is that it's exceptionally well put together, but the stories are a little bit shorter because there's just so many of them. So it's kind of like, if you're looking for a deep dive kind of thing, it's probably not that, but it's more about the bigger picture of finding the similarities in these cases. But he says, look, with this, like in my history, what part of my story really does come from my father, who says that to this day, he's still unsure about what he experienced was a dream or if it was something real, but it's something that weighed on him for a very long time. And he writes that his father was awoken in the middle of the night to find one of the cats next to the bed just simply staring up at him. And he said he got this feeling that she must have wanted him to follow her or something. So he does. Like he gets up and he starts following, but he said he noticed just how quiet everything was. Again, this Oz factor, right? This silence which is associated with this supernatural or ufological activity. And he said it was like a blanket had been tossed over the house. It was muffled. It wasn't complete silence. Now, the cat kind of wandered out into the hall and then looked back at him like it wanted him to follow, which is a bit kind of weird. But anyway, so, pardon me, he follows the cat down the stairs and the cat goes into the kitchen and she kind of looks up and she's looking at the basement door, right? So he kind of like unlocks the basement door and the cat nudges its head into a crack in the door and then darts down into the basement. He runs after her because he's like, well, why would she run down there? And as he does so, he says that she's just gone. Like she's just nowhere to be found. So he calls out for her and she doesn't come forward. And that's when he hears a noise. He said there was something behind the wood stove. So of course, naturally, you would assume that the cat has run behind the wood stove.
Yeah.
But it's written here that no, it was something else. The head and shoulders, it's written, of a green humanoid figure peeked out from behind the narrow back wall. It was a hairless creature with bright eyes. It stood about 5 feet tall. The slender opening where this figure stood and where my father kept the storm windows was too small to fit a person. He immediately ran back upstairs into his bedroom. But as he started to do it, like he kind of phased out and found himself in his bed. It's like he'd just woken up. And this is why it feels like, did that really happen?
Well,
or was it a
my
dream?
first thought is it even his cat? Is it some kind of screen memory, some kind of illusion to lure him down there?
That's what I was beginning to think.
Reminds me of a story we covered, I think it was last year, of a guy who told his grandmother told him a story of when she was little. She went down the stairs because she heard a commotion down in the basement, and there was a German Shepherd.
Oh, yes.
Barking at her nonstop. But she's like, we didn't have a German Shepherd. There was no German Shepherd.
Yep.
And it was her understanding eventually that it was a screen memory because it was associated with later encounters with what you just described, these strange humanoids.
Well, also this weird like perception of like, was that real? Was that a dream? I think that's the tricks of the trade with these things. Like it's done on deliberately. I don't know how, but so that you literally go, oh, it must have just been a dream. Like I must have been dreaming. It's not real.
Any marks on his body?
No, but there is a follow-up story.
Clothes on backwards?
Nothing like that, but there's more to this story which makes it a little bit more unusual. So yeah, he said, he wakes up, he finds that, his mother is lying beside him. She's undisturbed.
His mother?
So I think he must have been sleeping next to his mother.
What? Okay, this story just got extremely weird.
Well, no, I get that kids go to sleep with their parents.
Oh, for some reason, as you're telling it, I'm picturing in my head like a grown man.
No, it's when he was a kid.
Okay,
like it's the father describing when he was a kid.
As I'm playing it in my imagination, he's like in his late 30s and he goes back to bed with his mother.
No, nothing like that.
Okay,
it's when he was a
my
kid.
mistake.
No, that's fine. And that's the thing as well, because he was a child, this is how it can, continue to play this trick on you. Like, did that really happen? I was just a kid. But cut forward to 2018. And he writes here that my mother and father were walking along Bayside Road. This is in Trenton in Maine. It was around 4:30 in the morning because I'd get up and go for an early morning stroll. This was part of their regular regimen of fitness. But apparently, something caught his father's attention. And he turns to see this weird white form. He said it had no legs and no visible head, but it was kind of just gliding in this, like in his vision, right?
A torso.
It's like a torso.
Gliding torso.
It's like a gliding figure. But he said it kind of was gliding behind a shed near a house that they were passing. And he said the shed was about 9 feet tall and the figure seemed to be the same height. Now, this encounter lasted for, a matter of seconds. And it was just too brief for him to kind of like nudge his wife and say, hey, what on earth is that? But he says just as he was about to move on, he noticed something else. There was a dark, shadowy form that moved past the picture window of the house. It was a formless black mass that quickly disappeared inside. Now, he told his wife about what he had seen, and she believed him. Now, I'm not too sure. It doesn't say why she believed him, but it suggests to me that maybe she's had experiences as well. But we find out later on that he was reluctant, even though he was speaking to Nomar, years later telling him these stories. He was like, I didn't ever tell your mother because I don't think she'll believe me. And Nomar kind of responds. He's like, I think she probably would, but that's, beside the point. But there's this other encounter that really needs to be mentioned. And he says, look, my father told me about this final encounter that happened in the winter of 2022. So quite a recent report. He said that this storm had rolled in that morning and there was snow that was kind of blanketing much of the coast of Maine. And he said by late afternoon, the storm had kind of calmed down. The temperature was starting to warm. So he wanted to get out and start shoveling before the snow had a chance to melt and kind of freeze in and, cause all those headaches. So he headed outside. It was roughly around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He's shoveling snow from the driveway. And this is when he notices something rather unsettling. At the edge of the property, apparently, he said it was where it separates his yard from the neighbors. There's this dense grove of white pines and bushes. And this area kind of tends to thin out in winter because, trees are deciduous. And he says, as he's looking at this tree line, he says a small humanoid figure standing perfectly still is standing amongst the pines. But get this, Ben. It's wearing a plaid shirt.
Oh, boy.
It's one of these Keelian plaid-shirted entities. Like, where are they getting plaid shirts? Who's manufacturing these things?
The question is, where does the plaid shirt originally come from?
That's,
No one can trace its origins.
No.
It's too ancient, too obscure.
Is it just Scottish? Is that what it all goes back to?
Is the origin of the plaid shirt another dimension, another planet?
Well, you know what it makes me think of? It always makes me think of the Harlequin. because like the Harlequin is supposed to be this jester, like entity that, but shows up in people's hypnagogic states and that kind of thing. But it's wearing plaid or checks or, I'm wondering, is that what it is? Is that why it's a plaid shirt? Because it's like from this, low-level entity kind of realm.
Like people who take DMT see entities wearing the same pattern.
Yes, yeah. And I'm wondering if that's what's going on. So anyway, apparently also the being, its arms were outstretched to either side.
To the side?
Yeah, like it's like kind of holding its arms
Where
out.
have we heard that before?
Well,
we had a recent encounter just like that where it was standing like a T.
Yeah, I can't recall actually, but you're right.
It's a couple like that.
Yeah. So is that the way they say hi? I don't know. Is like a gesture for that? Anyway, he said, Nomar writes, my girlfriend just dubbed this being the arms out man, which is probably a good way to describe it. But apparently the father said to him, look, it was just standing there looking at me. And this whole thing completely unnerved him. He just stopped shoveling and went inside. And I thought that's fascinating as well. You've seen this weird, I don't even know what the hell this entity is, creature standing in your yard. And much like those other two cases, you don't respond in a way that people would expect. It's like, what the hell is this thing doing? You've got a snow shovel. Belt it around the face. Like, just do something to get it off your property. It's on your property. It's invading. Go for it. But anyway, no, he goes inside and he just sits down and watches television. Not mentioning anything.
As you do.
Not mentioning anything. So they were watching whatever was on television at the time. But he said he could feel that this figure was still outside and it was watching the house. So after a while, apparently his wife got up to make tea or whatever it was. So he's like, I'll quickly look out the window. He gets up, he looks out at the tree line. At the tree line. He says that creature, his eyes fell upon it. He said, but this time it was much closer and staring right into my eyes. Spooked the hell out of him. Of course it did. He said it wasn't until the following year that he told Nomar about this encounter. And he whispered to him what I said before, I didn't want to tell my wife or your mother because I don't think she'd believe me. And he's like, yeah, she probably would. So he said, look, these experiences that my father, has had allows me, really, it's given me this ability to listen to people's stories without judgment so that they can share these encounters. And I'm thinking that's actually like quite insightful, but also very important for this kind of stuff.
And you said this was a recent sighting, like 2022 or something.
2022 was that last encounter that was described to him. But again, in this particular location. So of course, when he's written this book, obviously, inspired by what his father has experienced, he's gone through and looked at some of these cases to look at, what's happening. And there is a long history in Maine of very strange things happening. But I want to list a couple of them just to show you how weird and I don't know, like how far back it goes. There's a case from 1884. It was published in the book, The Algonquin Legends of New England. This was recorded by Charles G. Leyland. And it tells the story of a hunter who encountered a very strange being that emerged from a rock wall. Apparently, he heard the sounds of footsteps coming from within a wall. He looks over, and apparently this figure just walks out of solid rock. It completely terrifies the hunter. But the woman speaking to him telepathically calms him down and invites him into the rock to meet her father. And she assured him that, it's fine. You can walk through the rock. Have no fear and advanced boldly. So he obeyed, and apparently he moved through the rock as if it were air. It just gave way, and he went on. He found himself inside a great cavern that was far within. That within there was an old man seated by a fire. The old man welcomed him. Apparently, they just had a very kind and delightful conversation. And then that was it. It's like he just walked back out of the rock. And this goes back to 1884. So
very fairy-esque, isn't it?
It is very fairy-esque, but it sets up...
He walked out of the rock and it was now the year, 2025.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of, spirited away kind of thing. And this book does cover those sorts of stories. Like there's encounters with the black-eyed kids. There's obviously a lot of ghost encounters. What have I written down here in my notes, actually? You've got the anomalous kangaroos, laughter upon the lake. That was interesting. I wasn't going to go into that in great detail, but there is this old story of where some guy had gone out to a lake, again with this body of water, and he'd just proposed to his girlfriend, and she'd accepted the proposal. But for whatever reason, it doesn't say why, but he hates her. Like he proposes to his wife, and he hates her. I said it to you today. I was just like,
Aaron sent me the quote today. I'll see if I can keep going. I'll see if I can look it up.
So he basically he hates this woman, and the reason why he proposed to her and took her out in this lake, which by the way is only like I think it was 8 feet deep, the water or something.
I've got the quote. As he paddled them toward the middle of the lake, she talked excitedly about extravagant wedding plans and even came up with names for their future children. Whenever she looked at him, he smiled warmly, but the moment she looked away, his lips would pull down into a grimace. He couldn't help it. He hated her. What?
Then why propose to her? So he gets her out into the lake and he swings the oar around and belts her in the face, like knocks her out, right? And then he pushes her off the boat.
Is he marrying? Isn't he supposed to marry her before?
Yeah, if he was doing it for insurance, he obviously stuffed up the whole process. But apparently it was like he thought that he could just like push her into the lake and then claim that it was a boating accident, lost her in a boating accident. And, that would cover up his tracks. But the story goes, and of course, this is one maybe small issue that I have is that there's not really like many of these stories are kind of like more anecdotal or, and like references Reddit, that kind of stuff. So it's not reliable. But apparently though, with this particular story, the legend goes is that he also, as he tossed her out of the boat, it caused the boat to flip and he was thrown out as well. And as he was thrown out, he managed to climb back up onto it because he couldn't swim and he was on the overturned boat and he stayed there for God knows how long until someone came along and rescued him. But as he was being rescued, he was suddenly overcome by something from the shoreline and he started laughing like the 1980s film Joker. Like he was just hysterically laughing, completely out of control. And apparently he continued to laugh all the way through his arrest and his trial and conviction and all this kind of stuff. And the story goes about this particular lake is that if you go there and you're at a particular time and you're, just boating around, you can hear this laughter that will come across the lake that seems to have no purpose to it, so no source to it. It's just kind of now embedded into the area.
So wait, is he the cause of this curse?
Well, that's the question.
Or does the curse precede him? I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand either. That's the question.
That's why you left the story out.
Well, is it like something that went into him and inhabited him and now it's returned to the lake? Or is it, it's like this weird paranormal chicken and the egg kind of thing. But I digress because I want to bring up this case that comes from the summer of 2003. Again, a more relatively recent case. You've got the story of Jason Cornell. He apparently would get up and go about his duties every Saturday morning. He would record with Nomar. They were like doing musician kind of stuff. And he said, "Look, I cherish this time. It was really great." But he said, around this time, as all this stuff was going on, I had this rather unusual experience at that particular apartment where he was doing this musician stuff. And I thought, okay, again, you've now got this familial or this family connection going on where his father has had a lifetime, really what appears to be a lifetime from childhood of these strange, unexplainable encounters. And now he's having these encounters because he says late one evening, it was in August, I wake up to go to the bathroom. And he says, my apartment's on the second floor. And he says it kind of like has these large windows where he overlooks the parking lot and it has this porch below. And it's a very standard kind of apartment. But he says behind the building that he's in, there's these railroad tracks that run parallel to the building, but they're kind of hidden by trees and shrubs. And he said, I stepped out of my bathroom and I immediately felt that something was off. It's just this sense. He said the air was thick and the sound seemed to be muted. And immediately he said it was very similar to, like it must have been coming to his mind about what his father had experienced. He said it was all just very surreal. And he said, I reached my kitchen when something outside the window stopped me in my tracks. Perched on the eave in this crouched position was the silhouette of something, but something that I've never seen before. He said it looked like a bird man, but only oily black, its skin glistening as it was hit by the moonlight. Now, he says, I can barely make out its features, but I could see shockingly that it had wings folded neatly against its back. It's like this weird, like Mothman, Batman kind of creature that's outside his... I know he got up to pee, but again, it has this sense of like he was awoken by something to see this. It's like it's this summoning. He said, I was frozen. I was absolutely paralyzed, but fascinated at the same time, watching this odd creature that was looking out over the parking lot. And he was trying to take in every detail, but it's something that's very difficult to do. And as he kind of leant forward, apparently his foot stepped onto a wooden plank, that's in the floor, and it creaked. He said that it kind of creaked underneath him. And as soon as it did, it made this soft creak. Well, I imagine it would be soft because it's outside, but the creature heard it. He said the creature's head turned sharply in my direction. Its movements were deliberate. It had this pointed, oversized ear that was twitching as if it had locked into the sound. And he kind of gasped for a moment and he kind of stayed just quiet. But he said this thing started to stand up and it rises to this full height. And he said when it rose, it wasn't like this slow. It was this very deliberate snap-like movement. It was like it was up. He said it was an immensely fast event that took place and its wings, like on a spring, just shot out. He said it then leapt off the roof and disappeared through the trees heading towards the railroad tracks.
How big was this thing? How tall was it?
It's like a standard humanoid creature. It doesn't say exactly how big it is, but I get the impression that it's just a normal-sized human.
Does he describe the face?
No, he doesn't describe the face, but he says the next morning, he said, well, hang on a second. Like his father, his next memory is waking up in the morning, like what happened to his father. He says, after I made coffee, I started replaying the events over in my head and I convinced myself that it was a dream. I opened the window, I leaned out. He was looking where the creature was, looking onto the eave. And of course, there was no trace. There was no trace of what had happened. So he's like, oh, okay. He's like, I've again got this feeling that I should check the railroad tracks. He doesn't know why, but he does. He heads out towards the railroad tracks. And if you recall, like, this is something that Nick Redfern has highlighted, on many occasions, but Merrily Harpour has highlighted this as well. It's like railroad tracks, they're liminal zones. And liminal zones attract these liminal entities.
Yeah.
That they kind of hover in the periphery. So he went and looked for footprints, but of course, he's not going to find anything. He said, after this, I was more convinced that the whole thing had been a dream. I'm like, well, is it? Because he says something else. Someone else, though. Something else occurred, but someone else reported something very similar in 2022. It actually wasn't very far from my sighting. Now he says, look, okay, this is from Reddit, but no, we shouldn't completely dismiss it because that's the experience he had. He didn't know anyone else. He hadn't spoken to anyone else. And this report pops up. The person says, it was 4:45 this morning, right before I was heading towards a bridge. They must have been on a train or something. I noticed something was parasailing or wing gliding, but it was moving super slow. It was very slow. I didn't realize until it had moved over that I could see what it was. It was basically at the same altitude the entire time. It was all black. It had no organic movement about it, but I was genuinely spooked. But it appeared to be this like flying humanoid, the same thing that he had seen perched just outside his apartment. So what are people seeing here? Like, what are these things? So he says many years later, after researching and interviewing witnesses for his other book called Otherworldly Encounters, for whatever reason, even though he was like, at first, this is a dream, but then he's got what appears to be a validating case that maybe it's not a dream because other people in the same area saw it. It weighed on his mind that when he talked to other people about their experiences, this event would come back. And, we've all had dreams that we know are dreams that we tend to remember throughout our entire lives. I think. I've spoken to other people that say this. I don't know if you're the same, but there's been one or two dreams in my life that I can remember, even from being a kid, but I know that they're a dream, right? And he says, no, it's different. It's like this is weighing on him. So he was talking to a man that is just simply given the pseudonym Robert Osborne. But in 2001, in October of 2001, he had a very unusual encounter. He was only 17 years old at the time. He was walking down Washington Street on his way home when he hears a squeaking noise. Now, he thinks it's a rodent or something, of course. That makes sense. But he said suddenly it was louder and clearer than what it really was. If that makes sense. It was like you pay attention to something, but this was causing him to pay more attention. He looks around and he says he's completely taken aback because this large humanoid shape is flying overhead. He says it has a round body with a long, translucent wings. It was kind of funny looking though, because it had a small kind of, like the head was a nub with tubes, he said. What truly struck him were the wings. They were enormous. And even at his young age, he knew all the wildlife in the area, and this certainly was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. This thing flew into a swampy wooded area behind buildings and simply vanished. And despite the bizarre nature of this encounter, this guy knew that it was real. And he shared his experience with friends and family, and many dismissed it as just being simply a large bird. But he's like, this wasn't a large bird. This was something completely different.
Its head was a nub with tubes.
Yeah, he described it as having a round body with long translucent wings and a head that seemed funny looking, small and strange, like a nub with tubes. That reminds me, the tubes thing make me think of like the reports of the mad steampunk scientists, the flying contraptions that have been reported in some cases from like the late 1800s, early 1900s. You know, people say that they see flying humanoids and it's usually some guy with like weird copper and like plates on his chest with dials and buttons and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I mean, maybe that's it, but I think it's a little bit different. But going back to Nomar's experience, he says, look, after this interview, I ended up having a dream about my experience. I'm like, well, like, yeah, like the fact that you're having a dream straight away, I don't know. He says, I was back in my old kitchen entrance, but the creature was crouched just as it was before. But this time, I was convinced that it would see me. Then suddenly it disappeared. I scanned the roof, but it wasn't there. Then I felt hot breath on the back of my neck, and I could hear its labored breathing. Next thing I know, I was waking up in a state of terror. I turned on the light, got myself together, and wrote everything down. Even though this was a dream, he says, I hope, it felt as though it was as real as the original encounter. I'm like, yeah, I don't know what to make of that because people have recurring dreams, but seemingly it seems like there's an element of trauma here. Like he's freaked out by this. The fact that this is consistent with like PTSD, right? He has this encounter. He's written it off as a dream. Later on, he's talking to someone else who re-triggers that encounter. And so his brain processes it by showing him another dream. Like, was it another dream or is this part of something more esoteric, a little bit supernatural? Especially, we have to keep in mind his father's experiences.
Yeah, the fact that it's repeating through the family line.
Yeah.
What is going on?
And also
some kind of familial curse.
Right. But they're not also, it's like, it's not standard kind of stuff, right? His father was seeing weird pixies flying out of a vortex. He's seeing a bat-like weird winged figure. Like, they're not really standard kind of things. Like, if the family was being haunted by ghosts, it's like, yeah, there's just ghosts. You know, but this is a little bit different. It's got this high strangeness connected with it. A little bit, you know, it's just a little bit unusual. So, of course, you know, these stories continue. He wants to dig around with some of the more unusual cases. And, okay, we've still got a little bit of time. So he says, look, there's this other case that came from the early 1990s. This witness came forward with two very eerie encounters that they'd had. But this involved entities that appeared to be cloaked or nearly invisible. I'm like, that got my attention. The first sighting took place on a cold winter night. This was roughly 1993 or so. It was in the Bridgerton kind of area. The date is unknown, but apparently it was around 10 p.m. when the witness stepped outside. Apparently they were going to their car, and it was this exceptionally starry sky. But they looked up because they noticed something. It was fleeting at first, but it was in the air. It was about 60 feet in the air above them, and it was something that was very unusual. It was moving. It was rapidly twisting and turning like a bird. I'm thinking this is kind of maybe like what was described previously with Nomar's account, right? But he says this creature, it was approximately 5 to 10 feet across, but it appeared to be transparent, and this creature was distorting the stars behind it like a glass sculpture. So it's transparent, but somehow the witness knew that it was organic, a living being. It wasn't mechanical because of the varying thicknesses and the way that it warped light as it moved. They said, I got this sense that it was either angry or just plain pissed off. Like, it was very rapid, these tight movements, and these movements were chaotic. Now, the witness watched this for about 3 minutes and then darted back inside because this thing kind of headed towards the treetops. But they said they were adamant that they wouldn't have noticed it had it not been for the sky being so clear with all the stars kind of brilliantly in the sky. So it's like, is this thing cloaked? Is it the same kind of entity that was being described in the air? Like, I'm not too sure what this is.
Is it a similar region?
Very similar region. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, is this another witness, right? So then the second incident for this same witness happened about 1 or 2 years later. It was 1994 or so in the Pleasant Mountains. Apparently this is near the Fire Lookout Trail. This is near Bridgeton and kind of going through to Freiburg. They'd been hiking. They were alone, which apparently was a rare occurrence for them. But they, pardon me, just got beyond this clearing when something very unusual occurred. They heard something charging at them. It was coming extremely fast. It was like a large hooved animal, something like a buffalo or a moose running with this strange kind of distinctive gait. But he's like, I know what a buffalo sounds like. This was different. It was like this very unique, distinctive gait. But this thing was huge. I have no idea what it was. But not only was the trees moving and this commotion going on, the ground was shaking as this thing was heading through. And just as it almost got to them, it just ceased abruptly. It's just like it stopped. And he said, though, it was there. It was big, it was heavy, and it was very close. Now, this witness said they were terrified by this massive animal, but at the same time, there was nothing there because it seemed to be cloaked. Like the only way they can describe it is like this thing was cloaked and then just simply seemed to disappear. It's like, why are they having these repeated encounters with these seemingly translucent or invisible creatures? Like, it's very odd. And even Nomar writes, he's like, whatever these entities are, their existence raises the question about what's hiding in plain sight. Like, what's there that we actually don't notice? Because it's like, yeah, you go out on a night and it's too dark, you're not really looking up, are you? You're not paying attention to that. Like, these seem to be these chance encounters, but maybe that's what's going on. Maybe this is just a natural fauna which is out there, but because we're so caught up in our world, and today as well, not only are we so caught up in our day-to-day business, we're caught up in our phones. So we're not looking up anymore. We're all looking down. We're not looking around us to get these reports, but yet the stuff is still there. I don't know. It makes me wonder if more of this stuff happens more commonly. There's other encounters in here as well that I want to highlight for you. And I just want to finish this episode actually because there's so much more in here. Just like pick up the book because it really is full of stuff. But what it does also have is this great story about what really could be considered to be the werewolf equivalent of the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter. If you recall with the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter, there's a bunch of farmers that were attacked by what appeared to be little green men, these goblin-like creatures that descended, I think it was the 50s, descended upon their farmhouse and besieged them all night. And that's something we've been talking about recently. We were talking about Ape Canyon and, similar types of reports. Well, this is the werewolf edition of this. Now, he's got most of the story in here, but I did dig a little bit deeper because if you look into Linda Godfrey's work, you've got Real Wolfmen, True Encounters in Modern America. I'll also link to an article where Shelley, who was one of the witnesses, actually reported this as well, like she described, because it was picked up by, I think, the Sci-Fi Channel.
Oh, so is it a report that was originally given to Linda?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
But it was picked up by the Sci-Fi Channel, and apparently it suggested that the producers went a little bit far with it. Like they kind of, and as they do, they kind of embellished it. Yeah, just a little bit. But from reading through that and looking at Linda's story, I've got basically the details of the story. So it's known, you probably are familiar with it, but if you're not, it's known as the Palmyra incident. This happened back in 2005. You've got Eric and Shelley. They are a married couple, or just a couple, I think, that are living in this house. Their house is a rented property, which actually is important later on. And the reason why it's like, it doesn't matter if you don't own the house, but it's because it's a rental property. You've got other people that have come through that house, right? That have also, as we find out, had their own experiences relatively recently. So they're sitting on their porch. They got this routine going that they were working hard. And of an evening, they would go and sit and drink coffee or hot drinks, on the porch. And this porch had this large grass kind of lawn that was in front of them. Then there was this gravel kind of road. And then in the gravel beyond the gravel road was this tree-lined area. And funnily enough, which I didn't get time to go into it today, but in humanoid encounters, there's this recurring theme of people encountering things at tree lines. Once again, this liminal zone, this, passing from one space to the next, it seems to attract these strange supernatural creatures. But going back to this particular encounter, so Eric and Shelley, they've also got their daughter, Chelsea, at home. They're known as the Martin family. It's Eric and Shelley Martin. They also have a son, Sean, but I don't believe he was living in the house at the time. So they're out in the middle of nowhere. They're surrounded by this dense tree line. And as they're sitting there, they see these weird lights. Apparently it was early in May of 2006. And these lights are in the forest that's beyond the lawn. And apparently Shelley grabs her flashlight and she kind of points it over to where these lights are because it didn't make sense. Like there shouldn't have been anyone else out there. Maybe it was hunters, but it was so close to their home. I don't know if it was on their property, but it was enough to get their attention, right? This is the curiosity thing again. It gets their attention. And as she kind of points her torch around, they notice that the Oz factor is occurring once again. This silence has descended, has blanketed the entire area. And they're like, what the hell is happening here? Apparently, Eric gets this feeling that he's just fearful. He just knows. He's like, there's something not right about this.
This is the house, apparently.
Right, yeah. And he's like, you can see, right, from this, so you've got this large grass, and that's the gravel there. So where this photograph is taken, it must be from that tree line, looking back upon the house.
Well, there's a tree line behind them as well.
But they were out in the front, apparently, on their porch. I don't know where the porch is there.
So it's on the other side.
Oh, the porch is on the left-hand side in the middle there. So, yeah, it must be over to past this barn thing. Anyway, going back to this report. So, they see that there's something out there. And apparently it just kind of, they light something up and they're not sure what it is, but they said there's like eyes. There's like 3 pairs of eyes that are kind of floating. And they know what eyeshine, they know what eyeshine is.
Have a drink, son.
Have a drink, yeah. It's like.
Have a swig.
It's the time of year where it's super dry in here.
Get a little moist.
Yeah, it's so dry in here.
It's so dry.
Oh, it really is.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, they see this eye shine, and at first they're like, oh, is that like deer or something? And they know it's not deer. It's something else. And they immediately, because it's higher as well, they're like, there's something not kind of right about this. And they realize that it's strange dog-like creatures is the way to describe it. And it's like they're caught out. It's like they're kind of caught out by this. And they said that what was really strange is like they dropped down and were kind of crawling across in the darkness. And as soon as they lit them up with a torch, these things jumped up.
They stood up.
They stood up. There was 3 of them. And
on 2 legs or 4 legs?
On 2 legs. 3 of them. They run towards the left-hand side of the property. So I think that's past that barn that you were showing before. But then they spin the torch around, and as they're kind of distracted by that, there's 2 other of these things crawling as well, heading towards their property. So they are obviously extremely freaked out by this. They go rushing inside. They lock the house up. Apparently they called, I don't know if they called the sheriff or I don't know what the authorities are in there, but their response was, yeah, look, we've got a lot going on, so just lock all your doors and we'll be there in the morning. So not a great kind of thing, right?
You've got to call animal control.
Yeah, right. Well, the other issue is that like Eric was like, I don't know why I get this, but maybe he's had other encounters, but he is truly freaked out by this. Like there's something more, there's this knowing or this feeling. And in fact, in the book that's, by Humanoid or by Nomar with Humanoid encounters, there is a story there about a telepathic encounter with a like one of these types of creatures where basically this guy he's a kid at the time, he starts wandering towards a tree line and something telepathic is saying, you're in danger, get the hell out of there. And as he gets close, there's like some type of dogman kind of creature that's in there. But look, just pick up the book to see that, they'll read that story. But going back to this, so the other thing was apparently Shelley had been like, I don't want you having guns in the house, but you can keep guns in the barn. And they had this, all the guns were locked up in the barn. So a couple of weeks later, apparently Chelsea, so the daughter, and her partner, Nathan, are just wandering through the woods and they've got the family dog and the dogs smell this smell and they flip out and they go running off. So they run after the dogs. And as they run after the dogs, they come across this weird kind of a hole. But it's not even a hole. It's more like a den that's in the ground.
Okay.
And it's large. Like it's this large, it's not a cave or anything. It's like it's something that's been deliberately dug. Like it's been manufactured.
A man
built.
What, built?
Yeah, it's been built because it's got
contractors came in.
No, it's like sticks and twigs and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, it just seems like it's kind of built.
So something with opposable thumbs built it.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. So there's like, it's setting the scene that there's something, but apparently Nathan, the partner or the boyfriend, husband, I don't know, he kind of starts to look, he doesn't go in, but he looks in and he says he doesn't see anything, but he can hear this growl. Like this, what he thinks is a low growl. They just nope it out of there. Like they get out of there. Now, Eric and Shelley, the parents, are feeling better about, that experience. They start drinking their coffee again, going back out on the porch. And as they're out on the porch, this strange fog seems to start flowing into the area. Like this fog is there. And they get this sense that there's some type of danger. So Shelley points the flashlight into the trees, and that's where they see like these creatures, right? And what's going on. And these creatures are running towards the pond. And I'm sorry, I messed up the report. It was the first account was that first night was that they simply just saw the eyes. But this, what I was describing about seeing the creatures kind of come, that's what happened on this particular account. So this is where it really escalated. And they realized though that these things not only running on hind legs, like they're not dogs, they're not humans. There's something, they rush inside, they close all the windows, they lock everything, but the dogs are outside barking. Like the dogs are still outside. So they're trying to get the dogs back in. And Eric's like, okay, I've got guns, but the guns are in the barn, right? So Eric heads back outside, hoping that he can get to the barn. And he says, as he does, he spins around with the flashlight, and one of these creatures, these bipedal werewolf, like a dog snout, but not totally a dog snout creatures, is growling at him. But where the house is, and you saw from that photo where you've got all these buildings, there's a sensor light. And where the sensor light has come on, it's casting this shadow, right? So you've got light, but there's also a shadow because of the buildings. He says this creature, this shadow crossed this fence, right? And where the light hit the fence, the creature puts its hand, it's not a paw, it puts its hand onto the fence. And when it puts its hand onto the fence as it's approaching him, it's almost like the light burns it. Like it pulls away.
Oh.
As soon as the light hits it, it backs off. Like it's more than happy to stay in the darkness of the shadow that's being cast. Very cliche, but very typical for these kind of creatures. So Eric's like, I know what I can do. There's a sensor light that's also on the shed. If I can get into that sensor light, I can stay with it. And
it's just like Jurassic Park. He's got to get to the generators and turn them on
much
before the velociraptors kill everybody.
And that's what happens, right? So he starts running towards the shed. He's got his arms up, wailing, and like throwing his arms about. The light does turn on, and all these creatures back off. But he says some of them are running across the lawn, and he says they're like grunting. Like there's this strange noise that's going on. I don't know whether or not he gets his guns because he knows that he's only got a few seconds before the light turns off again. So he manages to get back inside, and he says the house was now surrounded by these creatures. Like that obviously becomes so emboldened. He doesn't say how many, but there's enough that we know that they can hear them talking. He says when both Shelley and Eric say when they're talking, it's like this weird kind of low grunt, but it's definitely some type of communication.
Like the Bigfoot samurai language.
Yeah, maybe, but maybe not to that level, but something like that's going on. They're scratching the walls, they're outside on the lawn, they're running about. But also what was really unsettling is that they know that they were flesh and blood and real things, even though they're something out of a nightmare, like they're supernatural, is that they were so heavy that when they walked, the ground would vibrate and they could feel it through the ground.
Okay.
So like there's an actual, weight to these things. So they just stay inside locked up all night, wide awake, waiting. But apparently there was one particular point where they'd gone upstairs and woken up the daughter because the daughter was asleep and she didn't really believe what was going on. She was like, oh, they're just animals. She's like, no, you need to wake up. You need to see this thing. And they looked down and they were all just like looking up. They were in the yard, like 3 or 4 of them, maybe more, just like kind of looking up, like they're wanting to get into the house. And this was enough for them.
And the police haven't come at this point. No one's helped them.
No.
No other eyewitnesses apart from this family.
Just this family, right? So they wait until daylight because they do seem to be, and of course they dissipate, like with the darkness, they're gone. But what upsets them is that it's first light, and of course there's dew on the lawn.
There should be footprints everywhere.
There's footprints all through the dew.
There is.
Yeah, the dew's been disturbed.
And the photos are?
There's no photos. But they are tracks of two-legged creatures that are not human. But okay, so I mentioned the fact that it was rented before. So there's been other people. Now it comes out that Eric's like, oh yeah, like, well, when I first moved in, I did see this little girl with long leather boots and she was kind of disheveled and her hair and pigtails. She's pretty much like the little kid out of Little-House-on-the-Prairie.
What?
That's just like a ghost hanging around in the house. But he's like, I can deal with ghosts. I'm okay with ghosts. It's the werewolves that and the Dogmen that are just too much for me.
Is this meant to be totally unrelated phenomena?
Apparently,
that
totally
just happens to be a weird, creepy ghost.
Yeah, exactly. So they move out like after this particular evening, and
the ghost was the final straw,
right? So they move out. I think it's somewhere towards the end of 2023. But then, like, their story starts getting out because you've got apparently a couple of local radio hosts or something from a radio station. They're talking about some of the paranormal stuff and supernatural stuff that's happening in this area. And they tell basically the story that I just told you, right? They're retelling the story. This guy rings up, his name's Justin, and he's like, yeah, I actually rented that house for 2 years before they moved in.
Really?
And let me just tell you a few things that happened. The house was full of poltergeist activity. Things went flying off the shelves, lying around. They woke up in the middle of the night, and apparently when he woke up, something almost slapped his face and missed and then hit the pillow next to him. Apparently his wife was doing the laundry and had like the laundry baskets on the washer or something. The laundry baskets kind of went up and then were tipped over. Like, again, poltergeist kind of activity. But the coup de grace about what happened in this particular account was that without knowing the story, right, that Eric had seen this little girl from Little-House-on-the-Prairie kind of equivalent. Apparently, he's like, yeah, this is a previous renter. One evening we awoke to see a man and a woman in 1800s clothing just standing angrily at the end of the bed. It's like, so the house is infested with these strange ghost-like creatures.
And the house and beyond the house.
Well, that's the question. Well, this is where I go, well, is it that the house, like, is it built on a graveyard? Like, is this like one of these weird portal kind of things?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea because the hounds have always been the guardians of the dead.
Correct.
Anubis.
Yes.
And the house is full of the dead.
The dead.
And
yes,
all these hounds are trying to get in the house
and
full of the dead. So
yeah,
there must be some kind of connection
That's
there.
what I thought as well. And of course, all these liminal zones.
They don't care about the family's just in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I thought. So, look, really fascinating stuff. I'll link to those in the show notes at mysteriousuniverse.org. Make sure you check out the book as well, and also check out Alternate Perceptions magazine, a great little website with their regular monthly reporting on some really fascinating cases.
Good stuff. More coming up on this show. We're going to be looking at Irene Blinston's Cracking the Angels Code after the break. One woman's journey deciphering angelic messages of what is to come. Apparently, the angels want you to sell everything you own, quit your job, and go on a wild hunt in Antarctica for a man who died there 1,000 years ago, who's the key to saving the world.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Just your average Sunday Ouija board romp coming up. MysteriousUniverse.org/plus. Sign up today. Help support your favorite show. Should I bring it up on the screen? Why not?
Bring it up.
Why not? Sign up today, MysteriousUniverse.org/plus. You get access to the big extensions we do every single Friday. And of course, if you sign up for our MU Max tier, you get access to our entire back catalog. All Plus members get access to our exclusive podcasts that come out every single Tuesday. And if you sign up between now and the end of the year, you'll get access to MU Plus and our new show coming in February 2026. Mysterious Universe will keep going, of course. New hosts coming in December. And if you sign up for the MU membership, you'll get access to both shows. You get the memberships for both shows for the same price. So check it out today, MysteriousUniverse.org/plus. That's a wrap for this free edition of the show. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.